Property as a course in law is that branch of civil law which classifies and defines the different kinds of appropriable objects, provides for their acquisition and loss, and in general treats of the nature and consequences of real rights. So what is property? Property is an object which is or may be appropriated. Is it synonymous with thing? It is submitted that thing has a wider application because thing includes both appropriable and non-appropriable objects, whereas property is limited to appropriable objects or objects that are susceptible of appropriation. Property involves not only material objects, but also intangible things like rights or credits. Title 1: Classification of Property. First, let us have the classification of things. There are three kinds of things depending on the nature of their ownership. One, we have the res nullius, things that are belonging to no one. Two, res communis, things that are belonging to everyone. And three, res alicuhus, things that are belonging to someone specific. Res nullius are things that have not yet been appropriated, like fish still swimming in the ocean, or because they have been abandoned by their owner with the intention of no longer owning them. Examples of res nullius are wild birds, pebbles on the seashore, the stars, because they belong to no one. Res communes are those that are owned by everybody in that their use and enjoyment are given to all of mankind. Examples are the air we breathe, the wind, the sunlight, and the starlight. Everybody enjoys them. The third classification of things is res alicuhos. These are tangible or intangible things which are owned privately, either in a collective or individual capacity. Examples are books, shares of stocks, parcel of land. These are owned by persons collectively or individually. Now we go to the classifications of property. There are several classifications, but we will focus on the classification based on mobility and non-mobility, which is provided for under Article 414, which says that all things which are or may be the object of appropriation are considered either as 1. Immovable or real property, or 2. Movable or personal property. What about the human body? Is the human body real or personal property? It is submitted that the human body, whether alive or dead, is neither real nor personal property, for it is not even property at all, in that it generally cannot be appropriated. It is indeed a thing or a being, for it exists. In fact, it is tangible or corporeal being or thing, as distinguished from the human soul, which is necessarily intangible or incorporeal. While a human being is alive, he cannot, as such, be the object of a contract, for he is considered outside the commerce of man. He may, of course, offer to another the use of various parts of his body, even the entire body itself, in obligations requiring demonstration of strength or posing in several ways, as when he poses for a painter or sculptor. He may donate part of his blood, may even sell part of his hair, but he cannot sell his body. However, we have Republic Act 7170 or the Organ Donation Act of 1991. Its full title is an act authorizing the legacy or donation of all or part of a human body after death for specified purposes. This means that donation of all or part of a human body may occur only after a person's death. Who may execute a legacy? Section 3 of the law says, any individual at least 18 years of age and of sound mind may give by way of legacy to take effect after his or her death all or part of his or her body for any specified purpose. Who may execute a donation? Any of the following persons in the order of priority stated hereunder, in the absence of any actual notice of contrary intentions by the decedent, or actual notice of opposition by a member of the immediate family of the decedent, may donate all or any part of the decedent's body for any purpose specified. Thus, 1. The spouse, 2. Son or daughter of legal age, 3. Either parent, 4. Brother or sister of legal age, or 5. Guardian over the person of the decedent at the time of his death. This is provided for under Section 4. Note that the persons authorized may make the donation after or immediately before the death of the person. The legacy may be made by a will, but such legacy only becomes effective upon the testator's death without waiting for the probate of the will. A legacy of all or part of the human body may also be made in any document other than a will. The legacy becomes effective upon the death of the testator and shall be respected by and binding upon the testator's executor, administrator, heirs, assigns, successors in interest, and all members of his family. This is provided for under Section 8 of the law. Now we go to immovable property. There are 10 types of immovables enumerated under Article 415, and we will discuss them individually shortly. But let me just enumerate them. In the meantime, number 1, land, buildings, roads, and constructions of all kinds adhered to the soil. 2, trees, plants, and growing fruits, while they are attached to the land or form an integral part of an immovable. 3, everything attached to an immovable in a fixed manner, in such a way that it cannot be separated therefrom without breaking the material or deterioration of the object. 4. Statues, reliefs, paintings, or other objects for use or ornamentation, placed in buildings or on lands by the owner of the immovable in such a manner that it reveals the intention to attach them permanently to the tenements. 5. Machinery, receptacles, instruments, or implements intended by the owner of the tenement for an industry or works, which may be carried on in a building or on a piece of land, and which tend directly to meet the needs of the said industry or works. 6. Animal houses, pigeon-houses, beehives, fish ponds, or breeding places of similar nature, in case their owner has placed them or preserves them with the intention to have them permanently attached to the land and forming a permanent part of it. The animals in these places are included. 7. Fertilizer actually used on a piece of land. 8. Mines, quarries, and slag dams which the matter thereof forms part of the bed, and waters either running or stagnant. 9. Docks and structures which, though floating, are intended by their nature and object to remain at a fixed place on a river, lake, or coast. And 10. Contracts for public works and servitudes and other real rights over immovable property. The law does not define what an immovable is. It only enumerates them under Article 415. And first in the list is land, buildings, roads, and constructions of all kinds adhered to the soil. Land is the best example of an immovable property. It is immovable whether it is owned or rented. Even if it is moved by an earthquake or by an extraordinary happening, land is immovable. However, yung lupa sa paso, it is not immovable. It is movable or personal property because it is no longer adhered to the soil. What about buildings? Buildings are considered immovable provided they are more or less of a permanent structure and substantially adhering to the land, not mere superimpositions on the land like a barong-barong. This is true whether the building is built on one's own land or on a rented land. However, a dismantled house and or materials of such house should be regarded as personal properties because they are no longer adhered to the soil. A house or building adhered to the land is a proper subject matter of a real estate mortgage. However, can a house or building be the subject matter of a chattel mortgage? Yes, in some cases, provided two conditions are present. One, that the parties to the contract so agree, and two, no innocent third party is prejudiced thereby. However, even if so stipulated by the parties as personal property, still for purposes of sale at a public auction, the house should be considered as real property. What about constructions of all kinds adhered to the soil? It is understood that the attachment must be more or less permanent. Examples are roads, railroad tracks or rails, which are constructions adhered to the soil. The second in the enumeration of immovables is trees, plants, and growing fruits, while they are attached to the land or form an integral part of an immovable. Trees, plants, and growing fruits are always immovable for as long as they are attached to the land. But the moment they are detached or uprooted from the land, they become personal property. An exception to this is in the case of uprooted timber, while it is in the timberland. Because even if the timber had been uprooted, they are still considered as immovable if they are on the timberland. Growing crops, whether on one's land or on another's land, is considered an immovable. However, under the chattel mortgage law, growing crops may be considered as personal property and may thus be the subject of a chattel mortgage. The third in the enumeration of immovables is everything attached to an immovable in a fixed manner in such a way that it cannot be separated therefrom without breaking the material or deterioration of the object. An example of this is a fixed fire escape stairway firmly embedded in the walls of a house, which cannot be removed without causing substantial damage to the house, in which case the fire escape stairway may be considered as immovable property. Fourth in the enumeration of immovables is statues, reliefs, paintings, or other objects for use or ornamentation placed in buildings or on lands by the owner of the immovable in such a manner that it reveals the intention to attach them permanently to the tenements. Under this classification, the statues, reliefs, paintings, or other objects for use or ornamentation are considered real property by incorporation and destination. They must have been placed by the owner or by his agent, express or implied, and they can be separated from the immovable without breaking or deterioration. Examples of the items under number 4 are a fixed statue in the garden of the house, a permanent painting on the ceiling of a house, a picture embedded in the concrete walls of a house, or a rug or carpet fastened to the floor as in the case of a wall-to-wall carpeting. The objects must be placed by the owner of the immovable or the land or the building and not necessarily by the owner of the object. Of course, the owner of the building or land may act through his agent or if he be insane through his duly appointed guardian. If placed by a mere agent, the objects must remain chattels or personalty for the purpose of the chattel mortgage law. Here is a bar question on the subject. If during the construction of my house, I request my neighbor to keep in the meantime a painting that I own, and my friend attaches said painting on his wall, should the painting be regarded as real or personal property? Answer: personal property in view of the lack of intent to attach permanently in my neighbor's house. Number 5 in the list of immovables is machinery, receptacles, instruments or implements intended by the owner of the tenement for an industry or works, which may be carried on in a building or on a piece of land, and which tend directly to meet the needs of the said industry or works. The essential requisites under this paragraph are the following. 1. The placing must be made by the owner of the tenement, his agent, or duly authorized legal representative. 2. The industry or works must be carried on in the building or on the land. 3. The machines, etc. must tend directly to meet the needs of said industry or works. And 4. The machines must be essential and principal elements in the industry and not merely incidental. If the machine is still in the building but is no longer used in the industry conducted therein, the machine reverts to the condition of a chattel. On the other hand, if it is still needed for the industry but separated from the tenement temporarily, the property continues to be immovable. Examples of the machinery, receptacles, instruments, implements are machines placed in a sugar central and machines attached to concrete foundations of buildings in a fixed manner such that they cannot be separated therefrom without unbolting the same and cutting some of their wooden supports. So as a general rule, machinery, receptacles, instruments, or implements are considered immovable when they comply with the requirements of paragraph 5 of Article 415. The exception is when these are placed on the land or tenement by a tenant. In that case, they are treated as movable or personal property. Exception to the exception, when the tenant had promised to leave the machinery on the tenement at the end of the lease, or when he acted only as agent of the owner of the land, in which case, these are considered as immovable. Number 6 in the enumeration of immovables under Article 415 is animal houses, pigeon houses, beehives, fish ponds, or breeding places of similar nature, in case their owner has placed them or preserves them with the intention to have them permanently attached to the land and forming a permanent part of it. The animals in these places are included. Even if the animals are temporarily outside, they may still be considered as real property as long as the intent to return is present, as in the case of homing pigeon. But from the point of view of criminal law, they must be considered as personal property and may be properly the object of theft or robbery. When the animals inside the permanent animal houses are alienated onerously or gratuitously, it is believed that the transaction is an alienation of personal property unless the building or the tenement is itself also alienated. This is because in said alienation, the animal structures must be necessarily detached from the immovable. Hence, an ordinary inter vivos donation of a pigeon house need not be in a public instrument. A temporary bird cage, easily removable, or which may be carried from place to place, is a chattel or movable property. The birds inside are also chattel or movable property. Number 7 in the list of immovables is fertilizer actually used on a piece of land. Fertilizer is considered immovable only if it has been actually used or spread over the land. Before that, it is only movable or chattel. Number 8 in the list is mines, quarries, and slag dumps, while the matter thereof forms part of the bed and waters either running or stagnant. Mines, including the minerals still attached thereto, are real properties, but when the minerals have been extracted, the latter becomes chattels. Slag dump is the dirt and soil taken from a mine and piled upon the surface of the ground. Inside the dump can be found the minerals. Waters referred to are those still attached to or running through the soil or ground. But water itself, as distinguished from waters, is clearly personal property. On the other hand, canals, rivers, lakes, and such part of the sea as may be the object of appropriation are classified as real property. Number 9 in the list of immovables is docks and structures, which, though floating, are intended by their nature and object to remain at a fixed place on a river, lake, or coast. A floating house tied to a shore or bank post and used as a residence is considered as real property, considering that the waters on which it floats are considered immovables. Meanwhile, vessels are considered personal property because they are indeed very movable. And because they are personal property, they may be the subject of a chattel mortgage. However, although vessels are personal property, they partake to a certain extent of the nature and conditions of real property because of their value and importance in the world of commerce. So here's a bar question on the subject of vessels. Is the steamship President Cleveland personal or real property? Answer: it can be moved from place to place, hence it is personal property, although it partakes of the nature of real property in view of its importance in the world of commerce. Finally, number 10 in the list of immovables is contracts for public works and servitudes and other real rights over immovable property. The properties referred to in paragraph 10 are not material things but rights which are necessarily intangible. The piece of paper on which the contract for public works has been written is necessarily personal property, but the contract itself, or rather the right to the contract, is real property. A servitude or easement is an encumbrance imposed on an immovable for the benefit of another immovable belonging to another owner, or for the benefit of a person, group of persons, or a community. Other real rights over real property include real mortgage, antichresis, possessory retention, usufruct, and leases of real property when the lease have been registered in the Register of Property, or even if not registered, if their duration is more than 1 year. However, usufruct of personal property or a lease of personal property should be considered personal property. Here's a question on the subject. Are sugar quotas real or personal property? Answer: they are real property for they are by law considered real rights over immovable property, just like servitudes and easements. Movable property. We now move on to Article 416, which states that the following things are deemed to be personal property or movable property. 1. Those movables susceptible of appropriation which are not included in the preceding article. 2. Real property which by any special provision of law is considered personalty. 3. Forces of nature which are brought under control by science. And 4. In general, all things which can be transported from place to place without impairment of the real property to which they are fixed. The following are the tests to determine whether property is movable or immovable. This is according to Manresa. 1. If the property is capable of being carried from place to place. 2. If such change in location can be made without injuring the real property to which in the meantime it is attached. 3. If finally the object is not one of those enumerated or included in Article 415. In that case, the property is movable or personal. Article 417 states, the following are also considered as personal property. 1. Obligations and actions which have for their object movables or demandable sums, and 2. Shares of stock of agricultural, commercial, and industrial entities, although they may have real estate. Article 418. Movable property is either consumable or non-consumable. To the first class belong those movables which cannot be used in a manner appropriate to their nature without their being consumed. To the second class belong all the others. Movable properties are classified according to their nature or according to the intention of the parties. According to their nature, movable properties can be consumable or non-consumable, and according to the intention of the parties, movable properties can be fungible or non-fungible. A movable property is consumable if it cannot be used according to its nature without its being consumed, like soap, rice for consumption, or cooking oil for cooking, whereas non-consumable is any other movable that is not consumable. As to whether an object is fungible or non-fungible, this is the test. If it is agreed that the equivalent be returned, the property is fungible. Hence, if I borrow vinegar to consume and promise to return an equivalent amount of the same quality, the property is not only consumable, it is also fungible. However, if it is agreed that the identical thing be returned, it is non-fungible even though by nature it is consumable. Hence, if I borrow a sack of rice not for consumption but for display only, the rice is considered non-fungible. This is the end of part 1.